Hey guys, Maniac here with GameAccess.net doing my next podcast. And let me tell you something, that this podcast was a long time coming. I've been planning to do it for a few weeks now at least. But I intentionally needed to finish one of the games before I decided that I was going to do this. I had wanted to do this, but then I realized, I never beat this one particular game in the series, even though I had it for a couple of months at least, maybe even a year. And I only got so far through it, maybe about 10 hours or so, and I really wanted to bring myself to beat it and to get through it. So I could have that also to talk about in the game when I do this podcast. And I'm sure you probably can tell from the title, the game series that I'll be talking about in this podcast is going to be Kingdom Hearts, which is a multi-platform property done by Square Enix and Disney Interactive. It has appeared on both Sony and Nintendo consoles, as well as handhelds, basically ranging from the PS2, the Game Boy Advance, the DS, the 3DS, and the Sony PSP. And coming up at the end of the month is going to be the latest release of the game, the latest game release in that series, the highly anticipated Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance for the Nintendo 3DS. So really, everyone's really looking forward to that. I thought it had a tremendous E3 showing, to be perfectly honest, and I'm sure that a lot of people are looking forward to that one, certainly. But I'll get to that later. So, what can I say about Kingdom Hearts? I normally start these things with, what my first exposure to the platform or to the I guess you would say the series was a property. And the truth is, I honestly don't know. When the first Kingdom Hearts game came out, it was pretty well. It had some pretty darn good exposure, and basically, a lot of people believe that was because the game was so good, and I honestly could vouch for that, I'm sure, having played the game. The game was very, very, very well made. This was a RPG, but this was like the kind of game that nobody could have possibly had ever seen coming. Here was a game that basically was made by Square Enix, published by Disney. It had taken all of the Disney properties, or that it could get its hands on, or the good majority of the Disney properties, even classic Disney properties, and merged that with all the Final Fantasy properties into a new type of game series, where you'd be able to interact with Disney characters, Final Fantasy characters, new characters, familiar characters, in the ways that you would remember them, and a whole new type to battle a whole new type of evil, and to save all of the worlds. What a concept! I mean, just what a concept! Seriously, when you think about it, I mean, that's epic. That's an epic concept. And it was being done on the PS2. Now, growing up, I was never a huge fan of the Final Fantasy games. I never played any of them. That was because I never had really any of the consoles that, growing up. I never really kept any game consoles. I basically was just a PC guy, and for the most part, the Final Fantasy games didn't really come to the PC until much, much later. And so I hadn't really gotten any exposure to the Square or the Square games. But the word of mouth traveled on it. It traveled pretty far. And not having a PS2 at the time, I had certainly constantly being able, seeing it on shelves, because the game had been re-released and reprinted on several occasions. I mean, the first game. I had been really excited about it. I had certainly been thinking about it. In fact, actually, I had some friends that were telling me I should play it. But of course, I didn't have a PS2. But kind of like with Final Fantasy X or some other games I had on a list, or like Metal Gear Solid for 2 or 3, I kind of had the thoughts that I would, if I ever did get a PS3, that would be on my list of games I'd be interested in picking up. And around 2004 or 2005, I think it was 2005, when I finally did get myself a PS2, I started going through a list of like games I needed to pick up for the console. And by this point, I had already been exposed to the property on a few occasions. I had never played the first game, but I remembered either at I believe it was E3 2003 or E3 2004. I had heard that the game had been the new game in the series had been ported, had been created for the Game Boy Advance, which I did not have. And I wanted to. I actually got to demo a little bit or use a little bit of it at E3 that year in the Disney booth. And I thought, oh, it's kind of interesting. It plays really well for a handheld game, certainly. I was still quite interested in the property because I was certainly like with, I'm sure many of you, I grew up with the Disney movies. I remembered seeing just a long time ago, I remember all those great classic Disney movies, the older ones, of course, that everybody, I'm sure, would probably admit that they've seen: Pinocchio, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, of course, Snow White also, and then later on, being, with probably when Disney started going really, going back into their main feature stuff, that was like my childhood. Was like when I was a kid, those movies were coming out. Like, oh God, I'm sure everyone remembers Little Mermaid probably when that started off. And then basically after that, it was year after year a new Disney movie like Beauty and the Beast or Pocahontas. Although I admit I never saw that one. The Lion King, of course. Aladdin, of course. How could I forget Aladdin? I think probably my favorite out of that lot was probably a Goofy movie for many, many, many reasons. In case you guys are going to ask me what my favorite Disney movie is, at least animated-wise, I will say a Goofy movie, and that will be the end of the discussion. There is no internal debate about me about that. A Goofy movie is my favorite. So in case you guys are curious about that one. Also, there was, of course, the cartoon series, obviously, the Disney Afternoon, everyone was talking about that, Goof Troop, and Darkwing Duck, of course. So, yeah, Disney was always popular, and they had a major animation resurgence in the 90s, or especially the early 90s to the mid-90s, where they were going into 2D animation, and they were just everywhere. So that was my childhood, and I'm sure that's probably a lot of people's childhoods. And trust me, after coming back from Kineticon, that's only just to me personally been affirmed that so many people also grew up with with a love of these cartoons and these things. So Kingdom Hearts immediately got me just based upon the background alone. So around the time that Kingdom Hearts 2 was about to come out, I had a PS2 by that point. And Kingdom Hearts 2 was greatly interesting me. But I didn't, the game hadn't come out yet. And so there was that. And I hadn't played the first one, or the Game Boy one. So I figured if I was going to be playing Kingdom Hearts 2, I really should play Kingdom Hearts 1 before it comes out. Before the second one comes out. And I remembered, the game was, greatest hits by that point. I'm sure if you guys are looking at the video that the images that I'm posting up along with this right now, you'll probably see that I do in fact have the greatest hits version of the game, because it was relatively inexpensive, at $20, in stores, very easy get. And I started to play it, and I had to say that when I started playing it, the game started off a little difficult for me because I'm the kind of person who's, kind of a completionist gamer. And this was kind of the first time I'd ever played a really, really, really lengthy game in this type of style. So I remembered playing the tutorial sections, or the very early beginning intro sections and stuff like that, and starting to think that, in fact, I probably remember playing it maybe twice at least, thinking I might have missed something or something like that. Because the way it started off with how the characters, the character status selections early on in the game, you pick a strength and then pick a weakness and then pick some things about time of day and stuff like that. And I had a I was thinking, like, I hope I select the right things. And I'll even tell you guys that, what I picked at the beginning, because I don't know if you're interested, but, since you're listening to this, I picked the strength oh God, what's the word I'm looking for? A strength with attack. I picked an attacking strength and a weakness in magic. And that was how I created my character. And I remembered being, as soon as I started playing, completely drawn into this new world. Just completely drawn in. I thought it was so great. And I having never really played Square Enix games before, this was one hell of a game to start off with, because this game was taking a lot of the strengths of the Square Enix brand, Square Enix development studios and stuff like that, and basically creating just something new, but yet something recognizable and something that was great. And just being drawn in by the intros, like the opening songs. I know that a lot of people are probably mad about like the thing, certain songs that Square Enix chooses, but I really thought that using Simple and Clean was a great idea, and I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but I think that the song itself is probably so, how do I put this? Just the tune of the notes. You don't have to just basically listen to Simple and Clean in the way it was starting, the way it was starting off, but there's just so many different ways that you can make the song work. And it just seems like that's the enduring theme of that series. If there was like a theme for Kingdom Hearts, it would probably be Simple and Clean. And it's kind of a weird song, but the way the notes work and the way the melodies work, it just lends itself so well. Like, you can do it in its proper way. You can do a more upbeat version of it. You can do a purely instrumental version. You can do a slower instrumental version. You can do a techno version. And it'll invoke whatever motion you want to do. And it's the same song every time. It's still Simple and Clean by Udata. I can't pronounce that name. But, so... And plus, the Square Enix is just so great at doing the CGI cutscenes and stuff like that. So it was perfect. I thought that the Kingdom Hearts gameplay, just the way the gameplay controls worked and stuff like that, the fighting mechanics and everything else, was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. If I could make an RPG game and just say what is perfect, it would be the Kingdom Hearts gameplay. It was real time, which I was not expecting. I was expecting a turn-based game, kind of like Final Fantasy, but I was completely wowed by it and impressed by it. The story really brought me in for twofold reasons. Now, again, I don't know if I should really spoil the story for you guys, but basically it's a simple story about a guy who's basically floating between world to world. He's trying, he's far away from home. He's basically making new allies and new friends, trying to right wrongs, because it turns out that he's got this, he's been blessed with this specific weapon that wants him, to use it. And he's going to use that weapon, the Keyblade, to right wrongs and protect the worlds and to try to hopefully get back home. Along the way, his best friend is also... He's trying to find also his best friend, who basically ended up bouncing from world to world just like he did, probably before he did. And he's been going after him. And his best friend actually gets corrupted by darkness, lied to, and being deceived by a lie, goes after him. And so he has to rescue save his friend. They both also have a mutual friend who ends up getting kidnapped, and they have to save her. And does he like her? Does she like him? That sort of thing. It's just a classic type of story of young children with great responsibilities thrust upon them, and great circumstances being thrust upon them, and it just bringing the best out of all of them in the end. And that's just the basic plot line of the game itself. I can't really break it down any more simply. And that's not even including any of the Disney or the Final Fantasy characters being part of it. But the cool thing I liked so much was that it perfectly captured, and I will say this until every time, I'll probably be saying this several times, they got Disney. They perfectly, without a doubt in my mind, captured every single possible beat, every single emotion, every single action that Disney characters have done in every single property that they used. Whenever a character appeared, it was treated with the utmost of respect. It acted properly. And like I said, I grew up with a lot of these characters. So when I see Aladdin acting properly, or, I'll know it. I'll feel it. And I think that the moment I knew that they were doing it right was the moment where Sora, who's the main character, learns magic. Who trains him? Merlin from the Sword and the Stone. Awesome! It's like I love the Sword and the Stone. Who better to train Sora than the most powerful wizard ever? So when you find him, it's like, oh, and he was treated properly. You know, he's got his bag of stuff, and he's bringing the stuff out of the bag and everything else because he's moving. Works perfectly. And then when he says, I got some more help for you, you see this little, inside of his bag, you see this little pumpkin carriage, and it's his good friend, the good fairy. Not the good fairy, the fairy godmother. Who better to do that? And she says, bibbity bobbity boo. That's her magic words. I mean, you can't possibly, like that immediately told me that even outside of the worlds, that every individual character in that game series was going to be treated properly. That was the moment where I knew it was true. And the games ever since have never, ever done any character improperly. It's just not happened. So, I mean, other great moments in it was probably other things like how they got, the choice of music selections and stuff like that. I know I already mentioned Simple and Clean for the game itself, but when they chose to have like the Royal March, when they showed that the king, Mickey Mouse's castle with the Queen and everything else, when they showed all that for the first time, what was the Royal March? It was the Mickey Mouse Club theme. Perfect. The world, dun, 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 I don't want to really hum it because if I did, I might get sued by YouTube. I might get sued, but so I won't hum it or anything like that. But look up the Mickey Mouse Club theme. The original Mickey Mouse Club theme. Obviously, they kept it, everything else, but they used the Mickey Mouse Club theme beat for beat for the Royal March. It was a perfect decision. I got to give them total props for that. Other great decisions that they did. The royal hierarchy. The fact that Mickey Mouse was the king and Minnie Mouse was the queen, and that Donald Duck was a jester, but a wizard as well, and Goofy was a knight who fought with a shield. Now it was just perfect. It was absolutely, it was perfect. They took the characters and they basically used it. And the fact that they chose to keep Mickey Mouse is a character that was somebody we were looking for, but, was always in the, in the background or something like that. He was always one step away or something. It's just a really good decision. I think that they originally wanted maybe Mickey Mouse to be the main character, but I think that they did better by not having Mickey Mouse be the main character, by having a new character be this new character, and him fighting alongside Donald and Goofy was a great decision, I thought. To say nothing of when you're traveling between all these different worlds and stuff like that. Every single world that you travel to, like the Alice in Wonderland world or the Agrabah's Aladdin world, all of that stuff was just always treated perfectly. The set pieces looked right. The characters acted right. They got all the original voice actors that were alive, that were still alive, to reprise their roles. And I'll have more to say about that later. I intentionally, when I was playing this game, when I was playing the first Kingdom Hearts game, knew that there was going to be a secret ending. And I did everything I possibly could in the first game to make sure that I beat it under the circumstances under which I would get the secret ending. Because I thought that that was going to be something very important. I thought that the way they set it up for the first game to get a secret ending, they did a perfect job of doing that. Basically, you had to complete all of the game's storyline in one, in the game. It wasn't impossible. You could basically go through every world and get all of the, and can complete it. You could do that, without, ripping your hair out. It was doable. And I specifically remembered when I made it to the end game, hoping that I got the circumstances in which that secret ending was unlocked. I was fairly certain I was going to get it, and playing the final and making it to the end game and playing that final boss, and I can just remember the swelling of emotion that they invoked when you saw the ending to it. It was just so simple when you see like all the worlds being restored, and you heard a reprise of the song and everything else, but it's a different tempo, I think. And just like you seeing everything that you did in the game, and it's almost like, it was a reward. It was like probably one of the best endings I can remember in video games. It was a very good ending. There were still some loose threads and stuff like that, but by that point I knew that Kingdom Hearts 2 was on its way. It was coming out, of course. By that point, Chain of Memories was also out for the Game Boy Advance, so we knew that there was certainly going to be more. So I wasn't too concerned at the fact that it left some dangling threads. But for a game that had dangling threads, I thought it was done properly, it was done with respect, and I really felt a sense of accomplishment after beating it. And of course, I did get the secret ending. And here you saw at the very end a CGI, very cool secret ending, where you see two characters that we don't recognize at first, asking like, "Where's Sora?" And you see like what's probably the rumblings of like this epic battle about to take place, and you're watching this like, what the hell am I seeing? But in the context of seeing Kingdom Hearts 2, the scene made absolutely perfect sense. And it was still really cool to look at, of course. It was an awesome scene. But, and it was very, it was totally worth, like I said, it wasn't too crazy to get the secret ending in the first game. So seeing it was like the icing on the cake of just seeing a really good ending. So I got to give it that. Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories on the Game Boy Advance, I never played. I remember Twitch had played through it. And, in fact, I think Twitch had also played through Kingdom Hearts. But I can't remember exactly if he ever beat it or not. I think he was raving about the game for a little bit. But I don't think he ever beat Kingdom Hearts 2. I really couldn't tell you if he did. I know he beat Chain of Memories, though. I know he had on the original Game Boy. So, I'm sorry, on the Game Boy Advance. So, I know that. But I never had a Game Boy Advance. And, so Twitch had to show me like some things that he could of the game. Like he kind of explained to me what had happened, at least gave me a little bit of a blurb about it. And then after that, he showed me like I think the opening cutscene or something like that from the game in the Game Boy version, where he shows like the Sora going into this castle and all these weird things happening involving cards and memories and everything else, and Sora losing his memory as it was going on. And then he said that Rico, Sora's friend, who Sora had to save, who had kind of been deceived by a lie, and Sora had saved. This game was also, because you actually played, it had two campaigns, and it had Sora's story and it had Riku's story secondly. And it worked really well, because this game I thought was kind of like Riku's redemption, which I thought was really cool. So it worked in that manner. Yeah, I really thought it did. But I never played it on the Game Boy Advance. But like I said, I'll get further about it later on. When I did eventually play it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So Kingdom Hearts 2 comes out, and here I thought, wow, they took the game mechanics that they had created in the first Kingdom Hearts game, and they perfected it. That's how I felt. I know that a lot of the reviewers on Kingdom Hearts 2 thought that, the game was too linear, or the game was too easy. I didn't have a problem with either of those problems. Not a one. I do not agree. They could say that, but I didn't think any of those were issues. I really didn't. I thought that the game's mechanics were great. I didn't mind. Like I said, the first time I played it, I think there was like an easy, a normal, and a hard difficulty on the game. And they said there was going to be a secret ending, but they changed the gameplay mechanics of it. You couldn't get it under any circumstances on easy. You could get it on hard with 100% completion, but they weren't specific about what that was at the time. It just said 100% completion. And on hard, you could get it just simply by beating the game, as long as you could beat it. You didn't have to get 100% completion on hard. So I started playing the game on normal, thinking I could just get 100% completion and get the secret ending. So I'm playing through it, and loving every second of it. You know, the game starts off, you're introduced to a new character named Roxas, new worlds, new friends, everything else, new Final Fantasy characters that we hadn't seen before that were in other Final Fantasy games like Cypher and Vivi and stuff like that. New secondary characters, really cool setup, better graphics, better cutscenes, a whole new theme song. It had Sanctuary by the same pop star, so I really thought it opened up really interestingly. But of course, the first questions out of my mind are, where's Sora? What happened to Sora? What's going on? Now, the game took about 5 hours. In like a tutorial world, basically, where you're basically playing as Roxas, and you don't exactly know what's going on in the ideas of the metagame. Because the last time we saw Sora, he was just still looking for the king, and he found the king's seal. And that was at the very end of Kingdom Hearts. In Chain of Memories, which follows right after Kingdom Hearts, I'm going to spoil this a little bit. Well, not spoil it, but I'm going to tell. Okay, I will spoil it. Cover your ears if you don't want to hear this, or fast forward the tape a little bit. So where he fights his way through Castle Oblivion, which is this new place, which is where he ended up after the end game. He fights his way through. He's introduced to a new type of enemy called the Nobody. He's also exposed to this new organization of evil people. Originally, he spent the whole first game fighting the darkness, and all these little darklings and things like that. I'm sorry, the Heartless, and we always assumed that the Heartless were basically these characters that had lost their hearts, these fallen people that had lost their hearts to darkness, and then they became these almost mindless things with very few instincts and senses and that sort of thing. And so we're exposed to this new enemy type called the Nobody, and we don't really know exactly what this Nobody is until it's explained to us later. And this whole new and originally all the bad guys in Kingdom Hearts were basically banding together, and I thought that was great. Like all the evil characters had all pretty much became heartless, and but they were so powerful that they didn't basically deform themselves to that low. They still had control. They still had control of it. They were still pure evil, but they had, they were even tougher, more evil, more horrible, with stronger powers and that sort of thing. But they all banded together with the intention of claiming Kingdom Hearts, or ultimate power basically over all of the worlds, which was great. Great overarching plot. But here you had this new organization with their own things, but they weren't Heartless, they were something else. They were the Nobodies. And we're exposed to Organization 13. And these were basically if somebody, I'm going to explain it to you guys, even though I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm talking about this. A Nobody, if a Nobody was explained, I remember a Nobody being explained pretty plainly in Kingdom Hearts 2. I don't know if it was, I can't remember if it was ever explained in Chain of Memories, but basically, if somebody becomes a Heartless, if they're strong enough to remember what it's like to be without a heart, as if they had a heart, basically, if their memories were that strong, they also became a Nobody. So they basically were split into two. Depending upon how good your memory was about being a heart, you could just be a mindless Nobody as well as a Heartless, and be forever dissected into those two types of characters. Or if you were that strong, so if you were like so strong that you could remember what it was like without a heart, that you were still pretty much you, then you became a member of Organization 13. And you basically got an extra X in your name, and maybe you might remember kind of what you used to be, but you were still an autonomous person basically. You just had, you just did not have your heart. You just had no heart, but you could remember what it was like to still have your heart. So it was you were more powerful, but you still had no heart. And they're kind of tragic characters. They really were. A lot of them were very tragic characters. And their intention was to kind of get their hearts back, to use Kingdom Hearts to get their hearts back. They were going about it the wrong way. And over the course of, Chain of Memories, Sora ends up killing several members of Organization 13. I think he killed at least 6 of them. Sora and Riku, I think, killed at least 6. He's killed about 6 of them. So Organization 13 was missing people by the point of Kingdom Hearts 2. Now, that's not explained in the game, I don't think, even though there are organization members that you fight in Kingdom Hearts 2, but it is listed in the manual. So there was some background explained in the manual about what had kind of happened to Sora. But for the most part, Sora didn't remember what had happened in Chain of Memories, because all of those memories were taken from him. But we were exposed to a new character called Naminé, who had the ability to control memories and things like that, which was very interesting. And she was kind of almost like a prisoner in Castle Oblivion. And there were there was, and we were exposed to new characters like Axel and Luxine and other organization members, which were really, so it was a cool game. And then Kingdom Hearts 2 picks up, and we find out, we start the game with this Roxas character, so we kind of just treat it like, okay, what's going on? We don't really know, but like with, I guess you would say, like even with Kingdom Hearts 1, you kind of just let this whole stuff pass, and then you find it later, and you just kind of kick up when the plot picks up. And by about 5 hours in, we switch over from Roxas to Sora. And Sora has all of Roxas's abilities by the end of this. We're not really explained why immediately, but we know but Sora doesn't have all of his magic and abilities at that point. But it was made kind of clear that people had forgotten Sora. And then when Sora came back, they all started remembering him again, which was pretty cool. And then it kind of, right when the game switches back over to Sora, then basically Kingdom Hearts 2 really picks up its plotline and becomes very easy to follow. And the plotline is, go back to the worlds, save them, and it becomes very straightforward again, and then you're fighting, Heartless again instead of Nobody. So it's really cool. Occasionally you come up against a Nobody boss or something like that. But then again, the whole endgame, which I'm trying not to spoil, becomes, was the bad guy the last game really who he said he was? Are there even stronger bad guys after that? Who runs Organization 13, and who was the real person that pretended to be the bad guy at the very end? Who was that person that he was claiming to be? Who was the real person he was claiming to be? Again, the voice acting was phenomenal. Everyone returned to their roles. So that had the music was all back. Dude, they got freaking, oh God, what's the guy's name? Christopher Lee in this game. Everybody delivered a fantastic job. They got all the Final Fantasy actors to come back for the Final Fantasy roles. In the case of like some of the Final Fantasy games where they didn't speak, they used the Final Fantasy characters from like Final Fantasy VII Advent Children and stuff like that. It worked so well. And again, it was just like, and I didn't mind the linearity because I kind of thought that it was kind of confusing to navigate the first Kingdom Hearts game. So I liked the linearity of the second game. I liked the improved gameplay, like the limit breaks and stuff like that in Kingdom Hearts 2. I thought that was fantastic. I made it to the end game. I thought it had a fantastic ending, which I am not going to spoil. But it was a fun ending. It was a conclusive ending. It was a happy ending, which I liked a lot. And also it explained what was going on with that secret ending in the first game. And it explained that, okay, I'm going to spoil this for you guys. The secret ending in the first game basically had to do with when Sora, at the end of Chain of Memories, when Sora had gone missing, or was the Keyblade had chosen another. The Keyblade had chosen Roxas, which is why Roxas had access to the Keyblade early on in Kingdom Hearts 2. And we don't really know why. In fact, Roxas really didn't know why at first, until we finally are explained who Roxas was. Roxas was Sora's nobody. And the reason why is because in the first Kingdom Hearts game, Roxas had become a Heartless. He had lost his heart to save Kairi, his female friend, his possible, his girlfriend or something like that. He had done it to save her, and he got it back. So he was recovered, but apparently a Heartless had been created. It was Roxas. And Roxas didn't know that he was a nobody, at least in the very beginning. We didn't know, we thought Roxas was a normal person. And in the absence of Sora, the Keyblade had chosen Roxas, because it was like, I guess it felt like it was close enough. And Riku had been told to bring Roxas in, which is what that battle was at the very end. It was Riku on orders was to bring Roxas in so they could get Sora back, because they couldn't bring Sora back without Roxas. Like, they couldn't bring his memories back without Roxas. And the first time Riku battled Roxas, Riku had failed. But Riku did something terrible to give himself, more power. He had taken the body of the bad guy in the first game that we had thought had been defeated. He had taken his powers fully and taken his body and appearance, and with that increased power was able to finally get Roxas in so they could take him and recover him. They basically, the whole beginning of the game was established that it was going to be like a simulation or something like that, which I thought was really cool. By the way, I didn't mean for this to turn into a so what happened, but let's continue. So the whole beginning of the first game was supposed to be like, the Roxas part was like a virtual simulation while Sora was getting his memories back. Sora gets his memories back. We find out the nominee was Kyrie's nobody, but Kyrie had never created a darkness because her heart was of pure light. So there was no heartless for her. But basically, they kind of established at the very end, as long as Sora and Kyrie are together, that Naminé and Roxas could be together, because apparently Kyrie, just like Sora and Kyrie had a thing for each other, had deep feelings for each other. So had Roxas and Naminé. So it transcended even that. So I thought that was really a nice touch. So after ruining those games for you guys, I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to do that. There was a secret ending for that game as well. And as there has been a Penny Arcade video about comic strip actually about it, getting 100% completion on normal in Kingdom Hearts is an exercise in obsessive compulsive disorder. It is time consuming and difficult to get 100% completion in Kingdom Hearts 2. Really, really, really time consuming and difficult. Really time consuming. I do not recommend it. I don't. My advice to players who are going to play Kingdom Hearts 2, just play it on hard. It's not impossible on hard. It's pretty easy even on normal. On hard, it's not really that hard. I recommend, this is how I was able to do it, when you're told to pick 2 strengths, I recommend picking at the very beginning attack strength and then defensive strength. I have not been able to get through the beginning of the game without picking in defensive strength for the second thing. I tried doing attack and attack. In fact, I was able to do it playing it on normal. I could get, but through the beginning of the game, I could not get through it. It does take some extra grinding to beat the end game, but if I remember correctly, I was actually able to beat the game on hard at a lower level than I did at beating the game on normal. But that was probably because I did fewer things on normal. I'm sorry, on hard, because I figured as long as I beat the game, I could get the secret ending no matter what. Which is true. You beat the game under any circumstances, you'll get the secret ending. And the secret ending for Kingdom Hearts 2 is just awesome. You get teased like this whole epic battle with these knighted warriors and like this armor, and they're getting prepared to fight this powerful guy, a guy with no hair, who kind of looks like a nobody, or like a member of Organization 13, because he has the brown eyes. And then as the camera pans out at the very end, you see just all of these keys. Just all these keys, like all these keyblades, like in the, as far as you could see in this desolate desert, just all these keyblades of all different types, of all different appearances. Just, it was crazy. And here you were like thinking along the lines of, like, in the first game, there's only one keyblade, and yet by Kingdom Hearts 2 and 3, you see that there's at least 3 of them, and it's not really explained. It's like, well, what is it? How is there the keyblade, and how are there other wielders of the keyblade and things like that? Like Mickey Mouse had a keyblade, for example. And even, I think Riku actually had a keyblade occasionally, fought with a keyblade. And it's explained, it is explained in other games, like how this is possible. How is there, how is that explained? And I'll get to that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, fast forward a little bit. There were some more games released and re-released. There was a game, Kingdom Hearts Recoded, which was released to mobile platforms. I never played it. I never had a mobile platform that it was released to. And it was never released to the iPhone. I was kind of hoping that at some point they would release it to the iPhone, but they didn't. By the time, I think I remembered, none of the phones I ever had, up until I got an iPhone, supported that game. I think the only, I had a Motorola, one of those Motorola flip phones, which I can't remember what they were called, but Razr. my provider never had it, and I don't think my Razer was ever good enough to play it at full capabilities. But there was that. Also, there was another game. There were so then after that, so I never played it. I can't really talk about it because I never played it. So after that, Chain of Memories got re-released on the PS2. By that point, the PS3 had come out. The PS2 was still kind of around. It was still being supported because PS3s were still shipping with PS2 hardware. Heck, PS2 hardware was still being sold at the PS3 as the PS3 came out for quite a while, actually, because the PS2's popularity never really waned that much. There was still a lot of games coming out for the PS3. I can't remember exactly which year Chain of Memories came out. But it might have been 2007, might have been 2008 or something like that. But I remember that it was released as almost like a budget title. I think it was like, when I picked it up, it was $35, I think. And that was pretty much shortly after it came out. And I have, the original Black Label version of the game. I don't think there was ever a... There were obviously greatest hits editions re-released of it, that sort of thing, but I don't think there was ever a collector's edition. I did get a little index cards with some promo art and stuff like that included in the game, but that might have been for every version of it. And that's how I know the Chain of Memories plotline was, and that's all the games I was talking about earlier was based upon that. It brought in some... I did not like the gameplay mechanics of Chain of Memories. I did not like the card mechanics. It was very complicated. The redrawing of cards was very complicated. It took me forever to figure out how to beat Oogie Boogie, but I think the time when I finally got all the mechanics down for the game was during the Oogie Boogie boss fight in the Nightmare Town. I'm sorry, the Halloween Town. When I finally figured out how to beat him, then I finally got the mechanics down. It was that moment. By that point, I had gone through like 2 or 3 different worlds. So it was kind of funny thinking about that I would be able to, it would take that long for me to do that. But you know what? It's fine. So there was that. It brought in some features that I had been wanting in the Kingdom Hearts games for quite a long time. In particular, the cutscene viewer. The cutscene viewer was in Chain of Memories, and I was so happy that it was in there because the cutscenes were absolutely fantastic in that game. They were all pre-rendered, probably because, and you guys can quote me on this if I'm wrong. I'm sure that pre-rendered cutscenes were part of, I know for a fact that pre-rendered cutscenes were part of the original Game Boy Advance version of the game, but I am curious, like, what, did they redo some of the cutscenes for later games? Hold on, let me check. I don't know for a fact. I think, I wish that if they had redone Chain of Memories, when they redone Chain of Memories, they had kept the original gameplay mechanics from Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 intact and not done the card thing. But the thing was that they made the card plot, they made the card mechanics an irrecoverable part of the game's plot line. They just couldn't get, they just couldn't do the original mechanics. They had to bring in the card mechanics to this game. That having been said, if I had one complaint about it, it was the redraw time. But that was removed when you did Riku's plot. So this was, I thought, cool. It had a few things going for it. One, it had the cutscene viewer. 2, it had 2 separate campaigns, one with Sora and one with Riku. And I really liked that. I thought that was really cool. I did not like the card play mechanics, but I liked the story a lot. And so, overall, I was really happy with it. There is no secret ending in that game. There was no secret ending. The only secrets, as far as I could tell, really. So there's really no point to playing it on any difficulty other than easy, which is good because trust me, that game is that game. If you don't know that learning the mechanics, it takes a while. So you just play it through it on easy. It does have the separate campaign though, which is unlockable after watching the Sora's campaign, the main campaign's credits. Then you can switch over to Riku's campaign separately and play through that. And I totally recommend playing through both of them because they are both integral parts of the Kingdom Hearts story. And I really am happy for that Square Enix decided to port a game over to PS2. Then after that, Square Enix announced that they were going to do 2 more games and they were going to be handheld exclusives. By that point, the Game Boy Advance was over and everybody was using the Nintendo DS and the Sony PSP. And they said that 2 separate games were being developed. One was going to be exclusive to the DS and one was going to be exclusive to the PSP. I think a lot of people were probably upset about this, just like they were with Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, because it's like, the main platform had been the PS2. Now, I understand and understand by that point the PS2 was gone. Everybody was using the PS3 by that point. And obviously, the game had appeared on handhelds and both, for Nintendo before, so it was considered something canonical. And it was nice that they were finally bringing the game to the Sony handhelds. I would have preferred that they released either just one game and put them on both platforms, or they released the games on both platforms, because I never had a DS and I don't have a 3DS. So okay, once again, I never played the 3DS game. I never played 365 over 2. Never played it. So I couldn't tell you anything about it. All I know is that the game was kind of about, it takes place, as far as I know, sometime, it's between Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2. And I think it revolves around Roxas and Axel and the 14th member of Organization 13, which is kind of funny. That there'd be, there's like Organization 13. I thought there was only 13 members. No, there's a 14th member too. So, other than that, I don't know anything about the game. So I really can't talk about it at all. As for the PSP game, Birth by Sleep, I just beat that game. I just beat it. In fact, I just beat it today. I picked it up for my right after my birthday, maybe about a year ago. I think I had an aunt for my birthday got me a Target gift card, and with it I bought Birth by Sleep on the PSP. I think it was like $30 at the time. You could probably get Birth by Sleep still for about $20, I think. Totally recommend it. The secret endings are back. I don't know if I should really talk that much about Birth by Sleep for several reasons. The game is not as old as the other ones, so spoiling it is kind of interesting, but I do have a lot of comments I want to talk about. The game focuses specifically at the very birth of the Kingdom Hearts universe, basically, before Kingdom Hearts 1, before all the other games, and it focuses on new protagonists. Sora and Riku do make appearances, even Kairi makes appearances, but they're all as small children, as just as cameos and stuff like that. That having been said, they all brought in the original actors and everything else, so I'm happy about that. They brought in a lot of, they kept the real-time gameplay mechanics from the Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 games, but they changed up a lot, involving different stuff. Like, you basically couldn't make use of all of your abilities. You had to basically pick and choose what abilities and what magic abilities you could have. And basic special attacks and magic were both treated the same way. That you had only so many that you could fit, and if you leveled up or beat bosses, you could you certainly create more, put more abilities in your slots and stuff like that. You also had like other special abilities and things like that as well, like the D-Link system. And the special, I can't remember, but if you hold the two trigger buttons down, that system, I can't remember, like Absolute Zero and stuff like that. So the shot luck system, I think, is what it was called. And you're beating a new enemy called the Unversed. You're fighting a new enemy called the Unversed. There's no Heartless, there's no Nobodies, this precedes all that. However, that having been said, there are characters that you're introduced to early on that bear traits of Heartless and Nobody. But this is, this predates all that. So it really, I thought, made well for a prequel. It was the kind of prequel that you expect, that you would be hoping for, where it basically established how the universes ended up, how Heartless happened, how Nobody's happened, how the key, what was the key, why there are multiple people with Keyblades. Isn't there supposed to be one Keyblade? That's all explained in this game, in Birth by Sleep. And I don't really want to kind of explain it because, like I said, that game is still relatively new. Kingdom Hearts 2 came out in 2005 or 2006. I remember paying, top dollar for that back in the day. So, that's, those games are old. If I kind of spoil and talk about them, that's one thing. Birth by Sleep, that's new. So I really don't want to talk about that much. Needless to say, it really started off kind of slow and also kind of complicated. But the thing about it was that they used new type of mechanics. Here you had 3 different stories being told, which you can choose from the beginning. It wasn't like Sora and Riku's campaigns in Chain of Memories, where you started with Sora's and then you could play Riku's and secondly. Here you had 3 main characters, Ventus, Terra, and Aqua. And you could basically, from the very beginning of the game, choose who you wanted to play. And you had to beat, if you wanted to get all the information that you wanted, including the secret ending, you had to play through every single one of their campaigns if you wanted to get the whole story and everything else. Now, I made a bad decision early on when I first played the game, and that was I chose Ventus as my first character to play at. I don't recommend that, and the reason why is because you actually, when you're going through the training levels and stuff like that, you actually play as Ventus in the training level. So I kind of figured, okay, I'll just keep playing as him. I don't recommend that. If you haven't played the game yet, I recommend playing the game in this order: Terra, Ventus, Aqua. In that order, you'll have the best understanding of that game. You have the best understanding of the game's plotline playing through the game in that order. I totally recommend playing the game that way. It gave a good reason to actually, the cool thing was that Birth by Sleep could get away with a few things because it was a prequel. You could go into all the worlds that had been since destroyed. Like, it had been clear that there had been destroyed worlds where only a few characters had survived them by the time of the first Kingdom Hearts game. Some of them came back by Kingdom Hearts 2, but not all of them. But this predated all of those worlds being locked away. And so it was really cool to see that. Like, we got to go to the Dwarf Woodlands. We got to go to the Cinderella's Castle. We got to go to Sleeping Beauty's Castle. We got to see, oh God, what was it? Deep Space, where Stitch was. We got to see Stitch. Stitch's space worlds and stuff like that. All of that stuff was all still was great. So they got, they had an excuse. We can show some new worlds and stuff like that. That having been said, I could talk about just things like that. It's like, it was kind of funny here. Here I am as a guy. I'm bringing Cinderella her glass. I'm making sure Cinderella gets to the ball and making sure she gets the glass slipper. Or I'm making sure that Sleeping Beauty finds her prince. Or I'm making sure that Snow White and Prince, the prince are united and everything else. And that the Wicked Queen, I'm defeating the Magic Mirror. Speaking of which, I want everyone to know this. If you, the Magic Mirror is not referred to as the slave in the Magic Mirror in Kingdom Hearts. That's like the one thing I think they got wrong. The Kingdom, in Snow White, the Magic Mirror was a slave. And that is clearly defined. I don't know if that ever was clearly defined in Snow White, but in later reincarnations of it, while Walt Disney was still alive, I specifically remember Walt Disney actually doing several live-action, just weekly shows or something like that later re-aired on like the Disney Channel or ABC or something like that from like the 60s and 50s and stuff, where a man was the Magic Mirror, and he referred to himself as the slave in the Magic Mirror. So he wasn't called that. But it made sense that he would be a slave, like here he was bowing to the wishes of the queen. So they didn't use the term slave in the game. I don't know if that's because of political correctness, and I really would like to hear your thoughts on it. But it was the slave. He was considered to be a slave. And I don't know if that's because of how the original story worked, but they had no problem referring to him as that when Walt Disney was still alive. So take for that what you will. I'd love to hear a comment on that one, but he wasn't referred to that in the in Birth by Sleep. But I thought it was cool. His battle was pretty cool. Just like with Kingdom Hearts 2, there was a secret ending with Birth by Sleep, and it was pretty much unlocked with as it was with Kingdom Hearts 2. 100% completion. Now, you'd think that 100% completion on normal would be pretty easy because it's a handheld game. You would be wrong. So, I started playing through the game as Ventus on hard. And I got my butt handed to me in that game. I really did. I do not recommend playing through as Ventus at first. And playing it on hard, that is difficult. Especially given the fact that Ventus has boss fights in the middle part of the game. Which I don't... Really, really, really hard ones. I remember getting to boss fights and, about to get to boss fights and stuff like that and just thinking, oh, I'm a badass, and then having a boss fight and just having my rear end handed to me. Birth by Sleep was hard. Even on normal, it was hard. There were a lot of... It was difficult. So I remembered, I thought I had gotten stuck in it. And I actually remember Ventus's campaign being so hard, I think I shelved the game for a year and never beat it. And I thought I probably got stuck at like, I thought I remembered getting stuck at like the boss fight for Stitch's campaign or one of the boss fights for Stitch's world. And I thought that was the end of it. That was where I was stuck and I just couldn't beat it. When I went back through my files, when I thought, I know I'm going to do this podcast, I thought to myself, okay, I'm not doing this podcast unless I beat Birth by Sleep. So I dusted off my podcast, and I just kind of figured, I dusted off the game, and I figured I'm going to go back and I'm going to replay it, but on like normal and just 100% completion it. So I switched campaigns to Terra's and just left my original save for Ventus on a different save file, which I never beat. So I'm playing through Terra's campaign, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, this game is a lot of fun. Terra's campaign was great. I didn't like Ventus's campaign that much. They basically didn't make the levels linear. Ventus's campaign was a throwback to the original Kingdom Hearts type game. He was in very complicated arenas and stuff like that. It wasn't as, I remembered it being very complicated, the layouts of levels, especially like Cinderella's bedroom and wardrobe rooms and stuff like that. I remember it reminding me almost of like Alice in Wonderland, how confusing that was. It was very confusing to find everything in it. And I remember that being almost like a negative mark for me. I kind of thought, oh yeah, this was not, to me it wasn't a very good way to start off the game in like this complicated world. But then again, like I said, if I had played through Terra's campaign first, I probably wouldn't have had that. So I make it almost up to Terra's endgame on normal. And I'm thinking to myself at the very end of it, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to 100% completion it. And I stopped. And I thought to myself, you know what, I'm going to pick up in Ventus's campaign on hard. And I'm going to beat Ventus's campaign, which I hadn't played through in like a year. So I couldn't remember a lot of what was going on in Ventus's campaign. And I said, I actually was farther along than I thought I did. I actually made it to Neverland. I actually did beat Stitch's endgame and I end boss, and I made it to Neverland. And I picked up that from where I went. And I actually beat Ventus's campaign on hard. And don't ask me how I did it, because Ventus's endgame bosses were really tough. It must have taken me at least an hour or two to beat Ventus's last two bosses. And certainly Ventus's last boss must have taken me an hour, hour and a half or something. I played through that a lot, just for Ventus. And I beat the campaign just thinking, awesome! And now I've got 2 more campaigns, including a replay of a campaign that I already did. So I booted the game back up. I started Terra's campaign all over from scratch on hard. And I remember thinking to myself, it wasn't as hard as I thought it was, because I actually grinded. What happened was the Terra's campaign, the first world he went to was like, I think it was Sleeping Beauty's castle or something like that. The boss at the end of Sleeping Beauty's castle was difficult if you were at a lower level and you didn't have enough potions or something like that. So I recommend in that first one just grinding until like level 5 or level 6 or something like that, and then going after it and make sure you got plenty of potions. And that you should be able to beat it okay by that point. After that, I really didn't have too much problem with beating the game at all. I replayed through the whole thing immediately. And now, that having been said, I did play through the majority of all the game except for the end game. I didn't play through the last world. So I already knew the bosses by that point. I already knew the levels. I skipped some of the cutscenes because I already watched some of them pretty recently by that point. So I was just replaying the game on hard. I already knew the game mechanics for a lot of the bosses, so it was easier on that playthrough. But that was because I was getting more comfortable with the controls and stuff like that. But that having been said, there was some gameplay mechanics that I just never used or never got into, like the D-Link. I underused the D-Link. I must have used it maybe twice at most. Even on hard, I must have used it like twice. Or the shot lock I spammed, but mostly just for bosses. I used it basically as a boss killer. And there's only like 1 boss or 2 bosses it was completely useless against, and those were really hard boss fights, but I'll get to those when I talk about those later. But I don't think I would have beaten the bosses under any circumstances without that. That I used a lot. And then there was another thing which basically used, if the command bar, where I was able to, if you use certain magic combinations and stuff like that, then you'd beef up your character or create a special finishing attack. Those are never really fully explained to you, just to fill up a command bar by different attacks and magic, and to just determine for yourself what's best way to do a finish command, or maybe you'll beef up your character randomly into make him more powerful, make his attacks more devastating, and that sort of thing. I thought that was not well explained. Because basically you're left up to yourself how, what the best combinations of magic and attacks are to get what type of, commands or special abilities and that sort of thing. Or special abilities and that sort of thing. So, I beat Terra's campaign, and I think the only boss fight I actually had problems with was the very, very last one. For the most part, all the other... I knew there were, I think at least 3 bosses in the endgame. And, yeah, I think there were 3 bosses in the endgame. Or 3 boss stages or something like that. For Ventus's, I think there were only 2. And it was basically one boss, the same boss, 2 stages. For Terra's, it was, I'm sorry, for Terra's, I think it was at least 3 bosses, or 2 bosses, but one with 2, 2 bosses, but with 1, 2 stages, basically. Or 3, I don't remember. No, yeah. 3-stage boss for that one. I think the last one was the only one that gave me trouble. That last one was very difficult. So, that happened. Now, after having completed both 2 campaigns by that point, both Ventus's and Terra's campaign, I have to say that, unlike the original earlier Kingdom Hearts games that I had played, the endings for Birth by Sleep, at least the main campaign endings, were very, very sad. Very sad. For twofold. One, it was, it could be argued in some of those, when you play through those, last parts of the game, you could think that maybe your characters died, or those protagonists died at the very end. And so I played through Ventus's, ending, and I think Ventus died. Based that alone. Just based on seeing his ending alone. I was thinking that Ventus had died. And then I played through Terra's ending, and also I'm feeling the same way. Did Terra die? And also that, that combined with the version of Simple and Clean, the instrumental versions at low tempo of Simple and Clean that they used at the very end during the, very sad. I can imagine that some kids probably cried playing, when they beat those games. I could easily imagine that. Because they were very emotional endings. And you think that here you have characters that are sacrificing themselves for, restore humanity or something along those lines. That's what you're thinking. They're sacrificing themselves for the greater good, because you know that you don't see these characters anymore. They could possibly have died. And not having played through 365 over 2, I thought for sure they could. I hadn't seen them in any other Kingdom Hearts game, so I thought they certainly had indeed died. So then I played through Aqua's campaign. And I'd certainly recommend saving that one for last. That game, the Aqua's campaign, I thought was perfect at wrapping up all of the worlds, because the way you basically get into it is established in the games. You all go into the worlds at different times. Sometimes the stories overlap, but for the most part, you're all watching these stories overlap at different times. Very few times you guys overlap, but then you guys break up again. Sometimes 2 of them get together, sometimes 3 of them, one or twice. I think once, maybe 3 of them get together to beat a boss, but then they all scatter afterwards. And so, in order to get the full story, you have to play through all 3 of the campaigns. And trust me, starting off at Ventus, you can be lost very easily. Because Ventus isn't really explained some things at the very beginning of the game. He just goes off after Terra. Terra and Aqua both explain what was going on. So I definitely recommend starting with Terra or Aqua. And then, later on, as you travel from world to world, you basically are told, 1/3 of each story. You're basically given 1/3 of each story. And I think that Aqua's is the best of saving the last, because I think Terra is the story that basically comes in for first, at least in the plotline of the game. Ventus always comes in the middle, and then Aqua comes in at the end. I can only think of 1 or 2 times when maybe Terra starts it. I think Terra started, what was it? I think Terra started the story for Cinderella. I think Terra started Cinderella's story. I think that was it. I'm sorry, Ventus. Ventus started Cinderella's story. For the most part, the other ones, Terra basically did the other, began the stories. He started, and then of course Aqua overwhelmingly ended the stories. So I definitely recommend seeing, for linearity purposes, using Aqua last. And in fact, Aqua is actually the final playable character in the game. She's the only character you play as in the end game. And you can only get the end game for twofold. You have to beat all the campaigns and make sure not to overwrite any of the saves. Make sure to keep all the campaign end games saved separately. And then after beating the last campaign, you have to also make sure that in every campaign that you played in, that you got every secret report. And some of those are given to you in the plot over the course of the plot line, but other ones you have to find, and other ones are given to you. The only difficult ones I can imagine were I think there was like one that was hidden in Merlin's home for Aqua. I think that was the one weird one for her. There were 2 hidden chests in Ventus's story, one in the last world, the Keyblade Graveyard world, one in, there was one hidden chest in, what was it, Deep Space, which was Stitch's world. As for Ventus's, I think Ventus had the most tests, but Ventus had all these other ones. So there was all that. I'm sorry, Ventus you had to play through the Mirage Arena. You had to get pretty far in the Mirage Arena to get that one, which is actually tough. I only recommend battling through the Mirage Arena when you're very high level, like at least level 30 or something, at least for Terra. So yeah, don't beat the game unless you get all the secret reports. Don't beat the final boss, because if you don't, you're going to have to go back to your old save, get the final reports, get all the secret reports, and then beat the final bosses all over again in order to make it register with the game. So I totally recommend making sure that you at least get all the secret reports. So I beat through all the campaigns on hard. After, I think it took me a week. I think each campaign took me 10 hours apiece. So 30 plus hours total. Give or take an hour here or there extra for each campaign. And then I got notified that then you'll get notified to save a separate save for the end game. So make sure you do that, certainly, because you won't be able to beat the game without that last end game save. And just create a new file. And that doesn't unlock the secret ending. You have to, I'm sorry, the secret ending. That doesn't unlock the secret ending. Even on hard, that doesn't unlock the secret ending. You have to beat the end game as well on hard. And I did that. And just today, after beating Aqua's campaign, another sad ending, but not as sad as the other two, because Aqua did survive, and we do see what happens to Terra, Aqua is pretty clear to Aqua at the very end what he sees what happened. She sees what happened to Terra and Ventus. Both of them are not in good shape, to be perfectly honest, but they're not dead, that sort of thing. So that's kind of that's good in that respect. And Aqua is still very much alive at the end of Aqua's campaign. So at the very end of the game campaign, which I am not going to spoil, you play as Aqua to basically beat the final bosses. That final boss, the first stage, was very cheap. That was probably, I think, the hardest boss in the game. Maybe not, but I thought that was a pretty hard boss. I thought that was a really hard boss. I just beat it through sheer luck. Yeah, I played it really cheap, but yeah. So, because the shot luck didn't work too well against it. But the second stage, however, because it's a 2-stage final endgame boss, was really easy. And I was able to beat that in like 2 goes. So, I'll give it that. So, after all that having been said, we basically get a final ending. And it's also sad, I thought. It was also sad. Here you had this ending where, again, it's a sacrificial thing, where and again, it's sad. But it set up the rest of the Kingdom Hearts universe. And during the credits, as the credits were going, you hear new credits, a new version of Simple, or I think a new version of Simple and Clean, a different version of Simple and Clean than what the other things. The other campaigns had pretty much the same credits version, the same credit sequence, with the same version of Simple and Clean, the instrumental version of Simple and Clean. But the end game credits roll had all different credits with a different version of the song. So. Totally that. But I thought the redeeming part about that campaign was you get to see what happened to all the worlds you saved. You see the princess dancing with her prince, and you see the dwarves all happy and everything else. So you feel good about that. You feel good that you saved all these worlds, and at least all the people that you interacted with are all happy. So that was really good. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm not going to say what else you saw. So then it got to the point where you unlock the secret ending. And I unlocked the secret ending. Because I beat all the games on hard, which is called Proud Mode. That makes it all worth it. I don't think the secret ending is a teaser for another game. The secret ending is basically like an ending to the game. It really did feel like an ending to the game. And it kind of plays around with time and everything. Like some of it takes place right after the end of the game. Some of it takes place at the end of Kingdom Hearts 2, for example. So it's really all over the place. But it gave some great finality and a bit of a setup to the next game. So I liked that a lot. I think that if there was a true ending to the game, it's the secret ending. And I totally recommend everybody play through the game on Proud Mode to make it easy for you, and consider the secret ending to be the canonical ending to the game. Because the other endings, even the end game ending, like the final ending, is really sad. I thought it was really sad. Now I understand that it's sacrificial, but the end game, the secret ending, made it all worthwhile for me. It's really tough to get, but that's having been said. That's pretty much it. Also, I want to mention something. After having gone through ConnectCon, I think another reason why I thought that the Kingdom Hearts games were so canonical. I mean, I remember I actually interviewed Jim Cummings this past weekend, and if you look on my site or on my YouTube channel, you'll find one of the interviews that I did with him. I also had heard him take other questions and stuff like that. And people did ask him about Kingdom Hearts. I asked him about Splatterhouse. Got a great reaction on him about that. Jim Cummings, by the way, really nice guy. Just really nice guy. Very, very nice guy. But somebody did ask him about Kingdom Hearts, and I kind of thought getting him as being a part of Kingdom Hearts was very, very, very important. Because, here he is, the voices of all of these characters already. You want to get him back to redo all these voices. So it's to give an authenticity to it. And they asked him, is there a difference really with how the acting process happens when you're playing the characters on screen in an animation versus you're playing the same character in a video game? And he says, no, there's no difference. Sometimes there's different people in the booths, but to me, there's no difference. I play the characters the same way as I would, be it a video game and be it a or be it an animation or something like that. If it's the same character, I play it exactly the same way. And I thought that was the most important thing he could have, he said, and I think that was like one tip of the iceberg for what made these games so authentic. For what made these games feel like they were such a part of the Disney canon. Now, what does the future hold in store? What do I hope the future holds in store for Kingdom Hearts? Well, I'm going to need to get a 3DS from the looks of it, because the next game is going to be a 3DS exclusive. Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance, which is coming at the end of this month, at the end of July, July 31st, I believe, is coming as a 3DS exclusive. I've seen it previewed at E3. It looks fantastic. There is going to be a collector's edition of that. I think that is looking great. I want to play it. I was getting ready, actually. I do not have a 3DS or a DS for that matter. But shortly around the time of after E3 or around E3, I was looking seriously into getting a 3DS based upon the E3 lineup I saw for the 3DS. It looked very promising. Like there were some major games that were out at this point, both on the DS and the 3DS, because again, I don't have a DS, so I would also buy DS games for backwards compatibility. But also, I wanted to get the I wanted to get the Kingdom Hearts games for it. But then shortly before I planned on getting one, they announced the 3DS XL, which is a larger 3DS, which is coming out in the end of August or around the end of August for $200. It's going to have bigger screens and better battery life. No extra D-pad. I'm sorry, no extra analog stick, but it will have better battery life and bigger screens. So that I'm basically waiting on. I probably will get Dream Drop Distance at some point. Heck, I'll probably get a 3DS at some point, but at least not until the 3DS XL launches. So that is that. Boy. Also, I want to talk about something that everyone was expecting to come out at E3 or be announced at E3. It did not get announced at E3, and it has not been announced, so it is not considered something that should be coming out because it has not been announced. And that is, of course, a Kingdom Hearts HD collection. If I had one thing I would like to get, would be Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, Chain of Memories, and Birth by Sleep at least released in high definition for the PS3 and Xbox 360. I want that. For two reasons. One, I think it's a good decision, especially because there were enhanced versions of those games, like the Final Mix versions, which I haven't talked about because they were never released in the United States. They were only released in Japan, I think, maybe Europe, I don't know. But at least they were, I think they were only released in Japan. They were not released here in the United States, and there was a lot of cool extra stuff that they added to it. In fact, actually, there was a video I just watched before doing this podcast where somebody took the Hitler from Downfall and made a whole Hitler subtitle where he was complaining about the Final Mix for Kingdom Hearts 2 never coming to the United States, so even Hitler was mad about that. Of course, Hitler can be mad as all he wants. But just to say how far it went to the internet meme, you know. If they ever did a Kingdom Hearts HD, I really hope that they would bring the Final Mix versions of Kingdom Hearts 1, Kingdom Hearts 2. I think there was also a Kingdom Hearts Final Mix for Chain of Memories, Chain of Memories. And there was a Kingdom Hearts Final Mix for what was it? For Birth by Sleep. I know those are all available, but none of them have ever been released in the United States. So please consider the HD collections an excuse to re-release those games. I mean, when they did HD collections of like Silent Hill 2, they used the greatest hits version of Silent Hill 2. When they did Metal Gear Solid HD, they used the subsistence version of Metal Gear Solid 3. You know, all that stuff. You know, use it as the opportunity. Plus, I want the cutscenes in widescreen. That's pretty much it. I want those cutscenes in widescreen. Also, I want to mention that the cutscenes, there was a cutscene viewer in Birth by Sleep as well. I think that was a major thing because the secret cutscene in Birth by Sleep is only viewable in the cutscene viewer. But once you accomplish that, you get notified about that, so that's no big deal. So this podcast went a bit over time, but here I am talking about 3 at least, or 5 total, 4 at least games that were very complicated and very, very, lengthy games. There's a lot for me to cover with them. And so I'm sorry that this podcast had to last an hour, and probably I'm running out about an hour and 15 minutes at this point. So I want to thank you guys for listening. I really would, because I really appreciate it. Obviously the future for this series is Birth by Sleep. Is Dream Drop Distance, which is coming out to the 3DS at the end of July 31st. If you have a 3DS, pick it up. If you don't have a 3DS, get a 3DS and pick that up. Because I'm probably gonna wait on that though. There will be a collector's edition for that. Also, Recoded was released to the DS as well, which was the mobile game. I believe they ported that to the DS. I don't think it's been ported to any other platforms, but. So yeah, that's pretty much at least three games that were released on Nintendo hardware that have not been released on otherwise, and they're all pretty much playable on a 3DS, so I guess I have a good reason to pick up a 3DS now, certainly, which is Recoded, 365/2, and of course Dream Drop Distance. So yeah, I guess I better start looking into Nintendo hardware. As for the future, I really am hoping that after Dream Drop Distance, these games do get re-released in an HD collection for the PS3 and the Xbox 360. It would just be great. I really want to see these characters in art style. I think it would translate really well to high definition because I want to see these games look like they were really meant for widescreen. And for the most part, these games are not widescreen except for Birth by Sleep, because that the PSP is a widescreen console. So take for all of that what you will. I appreciate you guys watching this podcast. I'd like to hear your comments about it. I'm sorry I haven't played the Nintendo versions of the game. I just can't afford a 3DS right now, or I couldn't afford a DS by that point. So take for that what you will. Again, thanks for watching, and till next time, guys. This is Maniac over and out. Take care.